In the middle of the 13th century, the world trembled before a single empire, that of the Mongols. From the Black Sea to the Pacific, their armies had ravaged entire kingdoms. No civilization, neither Muslim nor European nor Chinese, seemed capable of resisting their expansion. But in the far south of the continent, a small agricultural kingdom was about to demonstrate that even the invincible could bleed. That kingdom was Jai Viet, the ancient Vietnam. Its people, used to surviving among empires, had forged an iron identity after centuries of resistance against China. In 1225, the Trần dynasty came to power and reorganized the country with a disciplined military structure and a stable administrative system. Their young emperor, Trần Tai Tong, knew that the only way to survive alongside an empire like the Yuan was to resist or disappear. In the north, Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis, had transformed the nomadic heritage of his ancestors into a modern imperial apparatus. In 1271, he proclaimed the Yuan dynasty and established its capital in Dadu, present-day Beijing. His ambition was not limited to conquering, but to control trade and politics throughout Asia. And to do so, he needed to subdue Southeast Asia, the route that connected China to the Indian Ocean and the Islamic world. The first step was Jai Viet. In 1257, Kublai sent an expedition led by Uriang Khadai, son of the legendary General Subutai. His goal was simple: to punish the kingdom that refused to recognize Mongol supremacy. The army crossed the border through the pass of Lang Son, advancing with the lightning tactic that had made Eurasia tremble. In a few days, the Vietnamese defenses were broken, and the capital, Tang Long, present-day Hanoi, fell in January 1258. But inside the city, there were no looters or prisoners. The houses were burning, the barns were empty, and the inhabitants had disappeared. The Vietnamese had executed the strategy Buon Kong Ni Trong, empty gardens, empty houses, abandoning everything to deprive the enemy of food and shelter. While the Mongols were disoriented in a dead capital, Trần Tai Tong and his army retreated to the mountains of the north. There, under the guidance of the young strategist Trần Hung Chau, a war of wear and tear began. There would be no frontal battles, but an invisible hell. Ambushes, sabotages, and nocturnal attacks from the rice fields and rivers. The tropical climate became an ally. Humidity, rains, and diseases devastated the invaders. The horses, the basis of Mongol power, died without grass. The soldiers, exhausted by the heat and fever, fell without fighting. In just a month, the invading army was on the brink of collapse. Without supplies or morale, Uriang Khadai ordered the retreat to Yunnan. The retreat was a nightmare. The local guerrillas attacked from the forests, destroying convoys and harassing the outcasts. For the Mongols, used to crushing in weeks, that campaign ended up being a humiliation. For the first time, an expeditionary force of the Great Khan had been forced to leave a conquered territory. For the Vietnamese, that victory was more than military. It was spiritual. They had defeated the heirs of Genghis Khan with intelligence, strategy, and knowledge of the terrain. The message was clear. It didn't take a great army to defeat the most feared power in the world, just a people determined not to kneel. The Yuan Empire, however, did not forget the affront. In the hall of Dadu, the name of Jai Viet began to resonate like a thorn stuck in Kublai Khan's pride. Hel Khan did not tolerate disobedience, and on his map that little green kingdom was more than a dot. It was an open wound. Peace would last little. The roar of the helmets would be heard again, and this time the Vietnamese response would be legendary. After the defeat of 1258, the great Khan Kublai did not forget the humiliation. For years, Vietnam continued to send embassies and symbolic tributes to the Yuan court, trying to maintain a fragile peace. But deep down, both nations were preparing for a new confrontation. The Vietnamese fortified their rivers, rebuilt their army, and consolidated the command under the brilliant strategist Tran Hung Chau, nephew of the emperor. In the north, the Yuan Empire had completed its conquest of China and was considered the owner of the civilized world. Kublai's ambition was now to establish a network of vassal kingdoms: Korea, Japan, Champa, and Jai Biet. He wanted a unified Asia under his seal, and any resistance would be crushed. In 1284, Hel Khan ordered a second invasion. This time it would be total. He divided his army into two fronts. One would advance from the north under the command of Prince Thoat Hoang, while the other would descend from the south, from the allied kingdom of Champa, led by General Thoat Cho. The objective was to suffocate Vietnam between two fires. Vietnamese chronicles speak of more than 500,000 men, although the numbers were probably smaller. Even so, it was one of the largest campaigns of the 13th century. The invasion began in December 1284. The Mongol columns crossed the Chilang Pass, advancing towards the delta of the Red River. In the south, the troops of Thoat Cho took the central coast and began to return the course of the river to Thanh Hoa. Under such pressure, the Vietnamese court decided to abandon the capital again. Emperor Tran Nan Tong, along with Hung Chau, ordered the evacuation of Thanh Long. The enemy could occupy the city, but not the nation. The strategy was clear: avoid direct battle, exhaust the invader. The Tran had understood that the Mongol force was based on their mobility and discipline, but also that they depended on long supply lines. If those routes were broken, the Colossus would collapse. For months, the Vietnamese waged a war of exhaustion. The peasants abandoned the villages, burned the fields, and hid the rice in the mountains. The guerrillas ambushed convoys, destroyed bridges, and harassed day and night. The chronicles of Yuan record constant attacks from the rice fields, as if the land itself fought against the army. In the spring of 1285, the army of Thoat Hoang took Thanh Long, believing they had won. But soon they were trapped in an empty city, without food or contact with Thoat Hoang. Communication between the two fronts was cut off by the troops of Tran Nhat Duat and Tran Quang Khai, who controlled the rivers and mountain passes. In the south, Thoat Hoang tried to move forward to join the Mongol prince, but was intercepted in Ham Tu by Vietnamese combined forces of infantry and river fleet. The Battle of Ham Tu in May 1285 was decisive. General Thoat Cho fell in combat and his army disintegrated. Deprived of reinforcements, Thoat Hoang was isolated. The Vietnamese launched a total counteroffensive. Truong Duong, Tai Ket, and Van Kiep became scenarios of successive victories. Thoat Hoang himself, wounded and desperate, tried to escape to the border. The chronicles say that he had to hide inside a copper tube to avoid the poisoned arrows of the Vietnamese ambushes. A symbolic image of the moral downfall of the most feared army in the world. In July 1285, the remains of the Yuan forces crossed back to China. Thousands of corpses were scattered in the forests and rivers of the north. The army of Jai Viet had survived. His people had resisted, and the Kublai Khan Empire had failed again. But victory did not bring euphoria. Emperor Tran Han Tong, aware of the magnitude of the enemy, decided to send emissaries to the Yuan court with gifts and words of respect. It was a calculated diplomatic play. Offer submission in appearance to gain time. As Hung Chau himself wrote, "If the enemy withdraws and we respond arrogantly, the war will return." For a few years, peace returned, but the Khan could not accept defeat. In the chronicles, Yuan is said to have remarked that the blood of the south had not cooled. Kublai Khan began to plan a third invasion. Larger, more ambitious, and with one goal: erase Jai Viet from the map. The plan was meticulous. 3 large armies would attack from different fronts, north, west, and sea, supported by a colossal fleet. Thousands of soldiers, supplies, and weapons prepared for total conquest. It was a war machine that no kingdom in Southeast Asia had ever faced. In command was Prince Thoat Hoang, accompanied by experienced generals such as Omar and Phan Thiep. At sea, a fleet of more than 600 ships led by Admiral Truong Van Ho transported supplies and soldiers. The goal was simple: crush Jai Viet through a war of total annihilation. But the Vietnamese already knew the enemy. General Tran Hong Chau, who had survived the 2 previous invasions, understood that the secret was to break the logistics. If we cut his food, his army will devour itself. The supply fleet of Truong Van Ho thus became the main target. In December 1287, in the waters of Ban Jong, the Vietnamese Navy ambushed the Yuan ships. Using a perfect knowledge of the tides and reefs, the heavy boats were trapped in shallow areas. The Vietnamese launched fire, arrows, and frontal shocks. The water turned red. The chronicles report that the bodies formed a floating barrier. Admirals Omar and Phan Thiep died in combat, and the rest of the fleet was annihilated. On land, Thoat Hoang, upon receiving the news, lost all hope. He fled to the north, following the footsteps of Lang Son, chased by guerrillas. The chronicles tell that he crossed the border covered in mud and shame. In 1288, he marked the final end of the Mongol campaigns in Southeast Asia. Kublai Khan, the most powerful emperor of his time, never attempted an invasion again. The myth of Mongol invincibility had been destroyed by a small people who fought with intelligence, cunning, and unbreakable will. The Bakjiang River became a symbol of national freedom. Each stake sunk in its bed represented not only a trap, but a lesson. That force without understanding can be defeated, and that knowledge of one's own soil is worth more than 1,000 war horses. That day, Vietnam not only defended its territory, but also changed the history of Asia. Since then, empires would look to the south with respect, knowing that under the rains and rice paddies of the delta, a dragon was sleeping, ready to wake up to any invader. If this story about the Vietnamese resistance against the Mongol Empire was revealing to you, subscribe our channel to continue exploring the battles that changed the course of history.